Welcome to MetroFocus. I'm Rafael P. Roman. We're just days away from the crucial midterm elections, and one key race that could very well determine the balance of power in Washington is right across the river in New Jersey's 7th Congressional District. Former State Senator Tom Kean Jr. is facing off against incumbent Democratic Congressman Tom Malinowski in a rematch of their 2020 contest. MetroFocus contributor and State of Affairs host Steve Adubato recently spoke with Malinowski about that election. He also had an exclusive half-hour conversation with New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy about some of the most pressing issues facing the Garden State. Steve joins us now to discuss both the governor's interview and that critical congressional race. Steve, welcome back to the program.
Always a pleasure, Raf.
So, Steve, we definitely want to get to that critically important race in the 7th Congressional District, and we will. But first, let's talk about your exclusive half hour with the governor. In 20 seconds or less, what would you say was the major headline of that conversation?
The governor's proud of himself. He's proud of his record. He's proud of what he believes he and the legislature, the Democrats in the legislature, are doing on property taxes. He didn't apologize for any mistakes that anyone may have perceived that he made during COVID. And he
proud and no apologies. That's the headline.
Okay, see, Ralph, you're always very good at getting me to the point. No apologies. You're right. That's what he said.
So listen, you covered a lot of territory in that interview, talked about a lot of issues that we won't be able to get to because of the constraints of time. So let me just get to a couple of them. You know, you started off, or early in the interview, you asked him about his relatively narrow re-election victory over Republican Jack Ciattarelli last year. Why it ended up being so close when New Jersey is such a heavy Democratic state. What was his response?
No apologies. No, seriously, Raf. He just said, listen, tough times, COVID, people are frustrated with government. He's in office. He's the incumbent. He catches the brunt of it. And he feels whether it was 1,000 votes, 10,000 votes, 100,000 votes, he believes a victory is a victory.
Yeah.
He's very confident about himself, not just in the state, but potentially something bigger than that.
Yeah. You talked about him and he dodged it, of course. But, you know, one of the things he said in response to that question to you was that perhaps, you know, he was always focused on affordability in the state, but perhaps it didn't get through to many voters. So he's redoubling his efforts to make sure that New Jersey is affordable now in the second term. Give us quickly some of the things that he's doing to make that happen.
The biggest one, Raf, is this so-called anchor property tax program, where property tax rebates are given to, or provided by the state to not just homeowners at a certain level of income, can't be above it, but also renters, which is a very significant initiative, if you will. But Raf, the fact is, in many people's minds, every survey you look at, the majority of New Jerseyans believe that the state is less and less affordable. Post-COVID, inflation, the economy, less affordable, higher income tax, no property tax in Florida, affordability. Yeah. So the governor's doing certain things, but the reality is a lot of people believe the state is just not affordable.
Yeah. So listen, you also spoke to him about the crisis on our southern border with 2 million undocumented immigrants crossing into this country in this fiscal year alone. Specifically, you asked him about the undocumented immigrants that Texas Governor Abbott and Florida Governor DeSantis have been busing to Sanctuary City and states from their respective states. Sure. How did he respond to that?
You know, it's one thing for me to characterize what he said, Raf. It's quite another to hear exactly what the governor said on that question, and here it is.
I think it's despicable to use human beings, particularly human beings who are fleeing a desperate situation, as it is in Venezuela, to use them as pawns. We have an immigration crisis in our country that's been building a long time, and we need to get around a bipartisan table and figure it out.
Listening to that, it's clear that he's equally sincere about his condemnation of the Republican governors, what they're doing, and about his desire to have a bipartisan solution to this crisis. So it made me wonder, is that how he has been governing New Jersey, in a bipartisan spirit?
Again, the governor would argue, Raf, that he believes he's tried to reach out to the Republican Party, but the vast majority of initiatives that have passed in New Jersey in the legislature are passed with Democratic votes. The Republican leadership has not been with the governor on a range of initiatives. They believe that his policies are wrong, his fiscal policies are wrong, his tax policies are wrong. So the truth is he believes, and I believe perception-wise, in terms of he's trying to be reaching out to Republicans, but it's being done with Democrats in 90+% of the cases.
Yeah. In most of those cases, they don't need the Republican.
No, they don't. They have the majority.
Yeah. So listen, you also spoke to the governor about the fallout following the Supreme Court striking down Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision. What has he been doing, or what has he done about reproduction rights in the state?
The biggest issue, and we'll go to that clip in just a second, Raf, the biggest issue is the codification of Roe versus Wade. It was done in anticipation of what the Supreme Court was likely to do in terms of overturning Roe. But this is what the governor said in response to my question on abortion.
Before Roe v. Wade, or before the Dobbs decision came down, I had already codified in law, signing a bill in January of this year that protected a woman's right to abortion. So that, thank God, is done. Before that, prior to that bill, all of the protections and freedoms were based on case law, all of which are in turn based on Roe v. Wade. So that would have gone away immediately in New Jersey. That's not the case. So please God, we're standing on the right side of history.
Is the codifying of abortion rights in New Jersey, does it mean at any point in a woman's pregnancy, all 9 months?
It does.
You know, just about every poll taken over the past few years shows that a significant majority of Americans, currently it's about 60% plus, support legal abortion during the first trimester. But that support begins to decline for abortion in the second trimester. And according to a very recent AP poll, it goes down to about 20% in the third trimester. You know, I ask this because, you know, that's one of the reasons why so many Democrats are reluctant to talk about that mostly what they're supporting, as you said in your follow-up question, leads to abortion up to birth.
That's right.
You know, in fact, I just saw quickly in CNN, I saw Dana Bash interviewing the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, I think it's Katie Hobbs, about this very thing. And Katie Hobbs just would not in 10 minutes clarify to Bash that that's her position. But the Governor Murphy, in 2 words, said yes, unambiguously. Did that surprise you?
Raf, very little. I mean, you and I have been doing this for, let's say, more than a few years, and we've interviewed lots of governors in states in the region, New York, New Jersey. But I'll say this: I was stunned that the governor outright said, absolutely, to full term, no except, that's it. And I'm sitting there going, did he really mean to say that? I believe he believes it, Raf. He said it. His office didn't call and say, we're going to put out a retraction. So the governor said it. It's out there.
Yeah. And by the way, you're one of the few journalists who actually follows up with that question. You know, Dana Bash was one, you're another. I haven't seen that question being asked that much of Democratic candidates. But let's turn now to the congressional race between Tom Kean Jr. and the Democratic incumbent, Tom Malinowski, which, as I said, by all accounts, it's a bellwether race. It might determine who is in control of the House for the next couple of years, at least. What are the issues and what are the unique particularities of this race?
The biggest one, Raf, well, journalistically, you and I believe we're in the same place on this. We have for 25, 30 years, we've interviewed candidates both sides of the aisle, election, public policy driven, no snarkiness, no name calling. That's what we wanted to do here. I called Senator Kean, former Senator Kean, personally. Our staff reached out for his campaign. Our producers did. No, they didn't even say no, Raf. They just didn't respond. I said 3 or 4 times throughout the half hour. I had to, only gave 15 minutes, if you will, to Tom Malinowski. Kean wouldn't show up, didn't even turn it down. And
he hasn't been doing it for the local media across the board. But, you know, his people have responded to that charge that he's not doing that. They're admitting it, but they're saying that that's because, you know, the local media seems to only be interested in asking him about abortion and asking him about Trump / January 6th. And quite frankly, I mean, there's something to that. And he is correct to the point where he says what concerns Americans and his constituents, I guess, is the economy, inflation, and crime. 2 big polls recently, you know, the Times Siena poll and the Harris Harvard poll both say that, and that abortion is declining in interest, and that nobody's interested in January 6th. So doesn't he have a point there?
No. And here's why. Because, Raf, you and I understand, most of us in public broadcasting understand the role of the media. It doesn't matter what Tom Kane thinks will give him an advantage. Yes, truthfully, the more interaction he has, the more interviews with media who are serious, he can make a mistake. He could say something he doesn't want to say. So he's running a bunker mentality campaign, if you will, and it may win for him. Here's the problem. January 6th does matter. That's not an opinion. It matters. What's the other side? The point is, he needed to explain and defend.
You mean it matters as an issue, even though it may not matter to voters?
Raf, as journalists, we have to stay on that issue. Even if people say, I'm tired of hearing it. That's like saying people are tired of hearing about COVID. We need to create greater public awareness. We need to have people understand that January 6th matters to our representative form of democracy. Tom Kane has said nothing on it. I wanted to ask him about that. Is that because we're the enemy of the people? No, it's because we want to ask legitimate questions.
And by the way, you asked Mr. Malinowski or Congressman Malinowski about the economy and inflation as well. But let me move on. I mean, because Tom Kane has debated Congressman Malinowski at least face to face at least once by, I think virtually, but face to face at least once. And the face to face and in the face to face debate, you know, people accuse him of trying to dodge the abortion question. He did specify where he stood on abortion. He said, quote, "I'm pro-choice. That's very clear. I, like most New Jerseyans, support a woman's right to choose up until 20 weeks." And he added that past 20 weeks, he supported abortion in, quote, "cases of life, health of mother, and rape and incest." As we said earlier, that's kind of like where most Americans stand. Is that not the case in the 7th District?
Here's the problem, Raf. And Tom Kane can speak for himself if he chooses to speak for himself. And Raf, you and I have interviewed him at least a dozen times. When we co-anchoring programs together when he was in the state Senate. The problem is there was a vote that came up in the state Senate before he left the legislature. And the vote was to codify Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, but he says that he voted against that because he didn't want the no restrictions up to birth. But anyway, we got 30 seconds left. If you could wrap that up quickly.
Bottom line, Raf, is he didn't clarify it. He didn't make it clear why he did what he did. He just doesn't want to talk about it. That's his right, but it's our right as journalists to press with legitimate questions that should matter to people because they have real impact.
So last question.
Women and their reproductive rights.
So last question, what is your prediction? Who wins in District 7?
Raf, in public broadcasting, we try not to do that. But,
but I'm going to ask you.
Of course you're going to ask me. We've been together too long. But here's the thing. I believe
in 5 seconds. 5 seconds.
Malinowski won by 1,000 votes this time. It's Tom Kane's race to lose because there are way more Republicans because of redistricting. He should win this race.
Okay, Steve. Well, thanks a lot, man.
You got it.